If you're approaching retirement and wondering whether you actually need a financial advisor, the honest answer is it depends. And getting that wrong in either direction has a real cost. So let me walk you through when advice genuinely makes a difference, what to look for when you're choosing someone, and what good advice should actually feel like. There are two mistakes people make here. The first is assuming they don't need advice because they've managed their own finances fine up to this point. The second is assuming that any advisor will do. Both can be costly, and I want to be upfront about something before we go any further. I'm a financial advisor myself, so you might be wondering why I'd make a video like this. The reason is simple. Not everyone needs to work with me. Not everyone needs to work with anyone, but some people genuinely do. And if you're in that group and you don't get help, that's a real problem. So I want to give you an honest framework for thinking about this. Whether that leads you to pick up the phone to me, or to someone else entirely, or to decide you're fine on your own. That's the right outcome. Let me start with when advice actually matters. The honest answer is earlier than most people think. During your working years, the decisions you make about super contributions, investment structure, debt, and tax don't just affect you now, they shape what you arrive at retirement with. Getting those things right early gives you more options later and makes it easier for you to reach your goals. Getting them wrong means you're fixing problems in years when you can least afford to. But here's what I see consistently. Most people don't engage with advice until they're 5 years out. And by that point, some of the best opportunities have already closed. The earlier someone sits down and gets a clear picture, the more there is to work with. That said, if you are close to retirement, the decisions do become more time sensitive. The margin for error gets smaller. And the cost of getting something wrong is harder to recover from. So whether you're 10 years out or 2, the right time to get clarity is before you need it, not after. Here's a question worth asking yourself honestly. Do you know exactly what your retirement will look like? Not roughly, but specifically. What income you'll need, where it's coming from, how long it needs to last, what tax you'll pay on it, what happens if markets fall in 1 year, whether your super is structured to support a pension efficiently, whether your estate planning is in order. If you can answer all of those with confidence, and you've stress tested the plan against a few scenarios, you may genuinely be fine on your own. But if there are gaps, if there are things you're not sure about, if you've been meaning to look into something for 2 years and haven't, that's usually a sign that getting a proper set of eyes on it would be worth the cost. So when does advice genuinely pay off? There are a few sides to this, and most people only think about one of them. The financial side is the obvious one. If a financial planner helps you structure your super more efficiently, and that saves you thousands of dollars in tax over 5 years, that advice has paid for itself many times over. If they help you work out that you can actually retire 2 years earlier than you thought, that's 2 years of your life back. If they identify a risk in your plan that you hadn't considered, and that risk would have cost you significantly, the value of that conversation is hard to put a number on. The question isn't really, can I afford advice? It's, what is the cost of not getting it? But there are 2 other reasons people find advice genuinely valuable, and they don't get talked about enough. The first is time. If you're running a business, or you're flat out with work, or life is just busy, your finances are probably the thing that keeps getting pushed to the back of the queue. You know you should be looking at your super strategy. You know there are probably things you could be doing better. But finding the time to actually sit down, research it properly, and make confident decisions, it just doesn't happen. That's not a personal failing. It's just reality for a lot of people. And in the meantime, the window for some of those decisions keeps getting smaller. An advisor takes that off your plate. Not just the doing, but the knowing it's been done properly. The second is reassurance. If you're someone who watches markets and feels anxious when they fall, advice helps with that. If you find super and tax and estate planning genuinely confusing or overwhelming, advice helps with that too. There's real value in sitting down with someone who knows your situation, has looked at the numbers properly, and can tell you with confidence you're on track. Or if you're not, here's what we do about it. That peace of mind isn't a soft benefit. For a lot of people, it's the main reason they sought advice in the first place. Retirement is a long time to spend second guessing yourself. But here's what most people miss. Not all advice is equal, and choosing the wrong advisor is almost as bad as not getting advice at all. So let me walk you through what I'd actually look for if I was sitting in your position. The first thing is how they're set up and who they're accountable to. In Australia, all financial advisors operate under a licensee, a company that holds the Australian Financial Services Licence and is responsible for the advisor's conduct. That's a normal and perfectly legitimate structure. What you want to understand is whether there are any conflicts of interest baked into that arrangement. Some licensees have preferred products, platforms, or referral relationships that can influence what gets recommended, even subtly. So ask directly, do you have any arrangements that influence what you recommend? Or are you able to recommend whatever is genuinely best for my situation? A good advisor will answer that clearly. If the answer is vague or defensive, that tells you something. The second thing is specialisation. Financial advice covers a lot of ground. Retirement planning, investment management, insurance, aged care, business succession. These are very different areas that require very different expertise. If you're approaching retirement, you want someone who works in that space specifically. Aged care planning, insurance advice, and business succession tend to be quite specialised. And an advisor who doesn't work in those areas regularly will often refer you elsewhere anyway. So it's worth asking up front, what does your client base actually look like? And what areas do you focus on day to day? The answer tells you quickly whether your situation is in their wheelhouse or whether you're at the edge of it. The third thing is transparency around cost. Good advice isn't free, and it shouldn't be. But the cost should be clear, upfront, and easy to understand. Be cautious of any fee structures that are hard to explain or tied to the value of your assets in ways that aren't clearly justified. You should know exactly what you're paying, what you're getting for it, and what the ongoing arrangement looks like. In Australia, advisors are required to give you a statement of advice, a document that sets out their recommendations and the reasoning behind them. If an advisor is vague about what the process looks like or rushes past the cost conversation, that's worth paying attention to. The fourth thing, and I personally think this is one of the most important, is whether you can actually talk to them. A good financial plan is only useful if you understand it and trust it enough to follow it. That means the advisor needs to be able to explain things clearly, not in jargon, not in a way that makes you feel like you should already know this, in plain language that actually makes sense to you. If you come out of the first meeting more confused than when you went in, that's a sign. Not that you're not smart enough, that they're not explaining it well enough. You're trusting this person with your retirement. You should feel like they're explaining things clearly, not trying to impress you with complexity. The fifth thing is credentials. In Australia, financial advisors must be registered on the Financial Advisors Register. You can check this on ASIC's Money Smart website. They must hold a relevant qualification, complete ongoing education, and operate under a licensee who is responsible for their conduct. This is a minimum standard, not a guarantee of quality. But it's a baseline worth checking before you go any further. So what does a good first conversation actually look like? Every advisor works differently. Some will want to meet in person, some will do everything online. Some will send you a detailed questionnaire before you even speak. Others will have a conversation first and then work from there. The process varies and that's fine. What matters is it's clear to you from the start. You should know what the next step is, what's expected of you, and roughly what the journey looks like before you commit to anything. A good advisor will take the time to explain that early, not assume you already know how it works. Come prepared with a rough picture of where you're at, your super balance, a sense of what you want retirement to look like, and any specific things you've been unsure about. You don't need to have everything figured out. That's partly why you're there. And here's something worth saying directly. It shouldn't feel scary. A good advisor is there to help you get clarity, not to judge where you're at or make you feel like you should have done things differently. Most people walk into that first conversation feeling a little uncertain. That's completely normal. What you're looking for is someone who makes that feeling smaller, not bigger. A good advisor will listen more than they talk in that first conversation. They'll ask questions, they'll want to understand what you're trying to achieve before they start talking about how to get there. If someone jumps straight to the solutions before they've properly understood your situation, take your time before moving forward. And the thing that matters more than any of their technical stuff is whether you actually like and trust them. You're going to be sharing details about your finances, your goals, your family situation, and your concerns about the future. That requires a level of comfort that no amount of credentials can manufacture. If something feels off, if you feel rushed or talked at, or like you're being steered somewhere, trust that feeling. The best financial relationship is one where you feel like the advisor genuinely has your interests at heart, not just technically, but actually. That's not always easy to assess in one conversation, but you usually know pretty quickly whether it's there or not. I want to come back to something I said at the start. Not everyone needs advice. Some people are genuinely well placed to manage their own retirement planning. Good information, a clear head, and the discipline to follow through can go a long way. But if you're in a position where the decisions feel complex, or the stakes feel high, or life is too busy to give it the attention it deserves, or you just want to know with confidence that you're doing things right, that's exactly the situation where a good advisor earns their fee. The goal of advice isn't to hand over control of your financial life. It's to get clear on where you stand, make the best decisions for your situation, and walk into retirement with confidence rather than uncertainty. This is general in nature, so it's important to consider your own situation, because the right answer here genuinely does depend on where you're at. If you're approaching retirement and want structured guidance rather than figuring this out alone, I work with Australians in exactly that position. You can find details below.